Well, hello everybody. Welcome along to DriversEye Live for the first time since the end of January. We're happy to be back with the racing community once again. You join us from the first round of the USACkarting.com Invitational eSeries. This is iRacing, and this is the Okayama International Circuit for round one of a 5-week, every Wednesday series to kind of help carry us through some of the tougher days of what we've got going on in the world around us. My name is Brendan Kazmarek. With DriversEye Live, as always. Somewhere to my left sits Joseph Mudrock. Hello, Joseph.
Hey, Brendan.
Welcome. Can't see you. You're not sitting anywhere in the broadcast booth with me, but we're all from the comfort of our own homes, which is wonderful, and ready to get on with some sim racing. Also, somewhere out in the racing universe sits Scott Michaels, driver of the number 34 Valkenhorst Motorsport BMW Z4, in the iRacing NLS. Hello, Scott.
Good evening, guys.
Yeah, welcome along, Scott. Happy to have you back with us again. This is the same trio, of course, that brought you the SimCraft 24 Hours of Orlando, the second annual event being held this past January, just at the end with you live for 24 hours there. Not quite the same tonight. This will be two 30-minute sprints, so we've gone straight from really kind of a wild day and a half or so at the Orlando Kart Center, and we've got everybody in their home simulators and ready to go for two 30-minute sprints. So I wanted to bring this to you, Scott, as we get qualifying underway. This will be a 10-minute session. We'll have the field whittled down to 40 cars, and then we'll move on after qualifying to two 30-minute sprint races. You, being the driver of the Valkenhorst Motorsport BMW, typically spend your time racing around the Nordschleife for 4 hours at a time. This is not that. This is very hard, very fast racing, and sort of a no strategy, winner take all sort of event.
Absolutely. So yeah, we're going from, and it's the same obviously for the USAC races themselves, having come just from 24 Hours of Orlando. I don't know if they've had anything in between. Maybe you can tell me, but it does require a different mindset, but a lot of people make the mistake of thinking sprint race means, we've got to go nuts. We've got, like, the first corner means everything. My opinion is that it's kind of the opposite, because it means that any mistake you make is so much more important, because it's not necessarily going to get equalized later on in the race. So if you screw up turn one in a 24-hour race, it's not that big a deal. You're probably going to get it back. If you make a mistake trying an aggressive move in a 30-minute sprint race and you end up in the gravel and losing 10 seconds, that's going to stick with you and probably not going to come back to you at any point during the race. So it's a different attitude, and it's going to punish any mistakes. So hopefully we'll be in for two clean races, if nothing else. But yeah, we'll see.
Yeah, we're approaching the last half minute of this session.
Yeah, what you see on the ticker across the top of the screen is the time remaining in practice. So we've already had the drivers' meeting conducted by USAC Karting's own Jason Burgess, who you might recognize from, very nearly on track at the 24 Hours of Orlando in his bright green LED suit, from which he held the post down at start-finish. So this is kind of an opportunity to get everybody back together. Normally, USAC Karting might not have hosted any events during this time frame, but with everybody sort of stuck at home anyway, this is a good opportunity for everybody to sort of shake off the rust, as it were, and get back up into the speed of things. And more than anything, just to be together and be competitive and sort of be in that same environment that was so electric at the SimCraft 24 Hours of Orlando is going to kind of bring us back into the racing world, where we've been sort of devoid of that competition over the last couple of weeks. At stake tonight, should be mentioned, we've obviously brought up the 24 Hours of Orlando a couple times now, but the event is promoted by PMG Promotions, the same group that puts on the SimCraft 24 Hours of Orlando. And at stake tonight are two $100 vouchers for an entry into next year's SimCraft 24 Hours of Orlando. So this is not necessarily just let's tool around for a little bit, have some fun, and see who's fastest. There is some real motivation here for teams and drivers to do well, which is obviously very exciting, and cheers to PMG Promotions for that. We're into qualifying, or will be into qualifying here in a few moments, I think, Joseph. Is that correct?
I think that's right, yeah. We've got to advance the session yet. But when
I believe we are already in qualifying.
It is a private qualifying session then, is it?
how about we do one of these? Oh no! Oh no!
It would appear to be the case that this will be a private qualifying session, which is quite all right. So this is not just we're not just setting a grid here. We're setting the field, and that is to say more than just we're setting 1 through 40. We're picking the 40 drivers that are going to be racing tonight. We've oversubscribed the event a little bit. Invites were sent out to everybody that competed in the SimCraft 24 Hours of Orlando, and we've got more than a handful of them here now, but we've got to whittle the field down into 40 cars that are going to be able to start each of our 30-minute sprint races tonight once this 10-minute qualifying session was up. So we're 2 minutes in, and we'll wait for some of the lap times to come through in qualifying now. Some of the drivers will be looking for at the top of the grid. Alex Gomez has been really quick in practice over the last 3 days. We've had plenty of server practice. Andrew Pinkerton, of course, is awfully quick. Nick Rowland is one of the sim racing crossover drivers that competed at Orlando, and plenty more are going to feature at the top of the field. First time is in from Brett Spaude, a 1:35.126. It's a couple of seconds off the pace. I think we're going to see a pole time probably in the high 1 minute 28s, if that's what you've seen as well there, Scott.
Yeah, another interesting thing, of course, is that qualifying times are invalidated if you register an incident point during them. Anyone who's not familiar with iRacing, an incident point is something which can be accrued either by running off the track or by touching a barrier or another car, but obviously that's not going to be an issue in qualifying. But the main point is that we can't have any of these drivers abusing track limits at all. Otherwise, their lap won't count. And I can already see a number of drivers have hit incident points. Some of them have been on the outlap, so not necessarily have their time invalidated. I'll highlight in particular Austin Olds, who has managed to accrue 7 incident points so far in this qualifying session. So I imagine he probably doesn't have a time up yet.
Andrew Pinkerton was briefly to the top of 129.075. Justin Richazen now sits on the provisional pole position, 128.716. And Nick Rowland slides right in between the two of them. So we've got 07, 67, and 77 right around the 129 flat mark. Trevor Andrisco in 4th, 129.270. And these will be the first lap set by each of these drivers, as Scott was just talking about. So really not even a banker lap at that point. That's getting on for the pace straight off the bat.
Yep, and we have a total of about half the field so far, having set a lap time. We've got 10 minutes total in the session, so there's plenty of time for these guys to get laps in. Again, though, they are limited to 3 laps maximum. So if you score incident points on all 3 of your laps, you're not going to get one in. So we'll be looking for. I would imagine there'll be a handful of drivers at the bottom who are going to be very disappointed, having pushed too hard on their laps and gone over the track limits. We've got Carlos Villa, who's gone P1. I know he set the fastest time in detached practice over the last 3 days, so that's no surprise seeing him right up the front. And he's got a half-second gap, well, nearly a half-second gap as well.
And that is remarkable. These are more or less fixed setups for each car, and they're very well balanced, but it's supposed to take sort of I'm going to do 200 laps and whittle a setup down to perfection, that element out of it for those who don't have the time and energy to devote to sim racing. That's a really, really quick time.
Yeah, to be 4 tenths ahead. Although Nick Rowland has now corrected that by going within 0.02 of a second, but unfortunately still sits second. So he did move up. I think he was 4th before that. So
we've gone from one massive gap to one very small gap. Like you said, just 21 thousandths of a second separating the two gentlemen on the front row after their second qualifying lap. 3 laps total are allowed. We've got 36 drivers who have set a time so far, and I think we're going to be kicking roughly 10 or 12 out at the end of this session.
I can tell you that Carlos Villa has the highest I rating of anybody in the session. It's actually
a subject I was about to broach. And actually looking at the other direction, because obviously a few of these guys are going to be fairly fresh to iRacing, coming more brought over from the USAC side. So there's guys like Andre Azzolini, who is on 1900 iRating, which is relatively close to the starting number. And then Hugo North is 10th on the grid at the moment with a 1341 iRating. So my guess is that these guys are relatively new to the service, so that's quite impressive to be so far up the grid.
Yeah, let's also shout out some of the people at 13th and 14th right now. Davey Hamilton and Wes Duchek are still on their rookie licenses.
That's great performances from them.
Ladies and gentlemen, bump day has begun. Or at least bump
might
minute.
be the only bump day of the year.
We don't need that kind of negativity here, Joseph. Right now, Justin Atchison has just put himself on the bubble, and just like that, gets bumped out of the field. 40th is now Zach Howell, Justin Atchison, Eric Johnson, Michael Smith, and Roger Mast. After almost 7 minutes of qualifying, now sit on the outside of the field looking in. All four of them iRacing rookies with safety ratings around 2.5, rookie licenses. A D license for Zach Howell there in 40th. Probably one more lap to come from everybody to try and get themselves into the field of 40. And this will be the 40 that compete in both of the races tonight. There are no promotions and demotions, so to speak.
Yep, and we've got a good dozen or so there's a few broadcasters in there, so about 10 other cars who have yet to set a time. And with the spread from 1st to 40th right now being 4.7 seconds, there's plenty of opportunity for these guys to throw in a banker lap, get themselves in the top 40 with good 2 minutes and 20 seconds left in the session, so not a huge amount of time. It'll be interesting to see if we see many more times thrown inside the top 40 to bump a few of these other guys out.
Carlos Vila, by the way, in addition to Nick Rowland, also was a satellite racing sim crossover driver, let's say, from the SimCraft 24 Hours of Orlando. So he's right at home in the simulator, and obviously was right at home in the kart as well. He was plenty quick there as well.
We've got a couple guys who are still circulating who are on the bubble. Our bubble man, by the way, Chris McCoy, is still circulating. He is sitting in 40th.
41st, he's just been bumped out.
Yes, indeed. Okay, and then Eric Johnson and Michael Smith are both circulating 43rd and 44th. David Nadeau in 42nd is out.
Yeah, and there's only a minute and 20 seconds here to set a time, so if we haven't done it yet, we're going to be awfully close. Should be able to finish their lap, but again, there's only 3 laps here, so...
Just had another driver bump into the top 40, so now Zach Howell, unfortunately, sits 41st, and it's Josh Olsen on the bubble. He's 4.3 seconds off the Pulse's pace, and there goes Josh Olsen, only 400ths behind Adam Maxwell, who is now 40th place.
Back at the top sits some recognizable names. Still, Carlos Vila and Nick Rowland on the front row, Justin Richezin and Alex Gomez 3rd and 4th, Andrew Pinkerton and Trevor Driscoll 5th and 6th. So plenty quick drivers there at the top of the field, as you would expect. Plenty of sim experience there as well to go along with their pace back in Orlando.
And look who's in 40th. Chris McCoy's got his way back in.
That's a great run from him to throw in that final lap and get himself just about in the field by 0.08 of a second.
Michael Smith was the last one still circulating outside that bubble and no longer is.
You know, yes, and then we have our field.
We watched practice over the last couple nights. 132.5 would have put you roughly in the midfield just last night even. And just like that, as we get into qualifying, you've got to string 3 decent laps together. And 132.5 is now the cutoff just to get into the field at 40.
One big name who did not set a time before qualifying expired was James French.
Absolutely. And I'm not sure... we hadn't seen him in practice, from what I recall, but he was a surprise to see here on the server tonight. If he is indeed, or had planned to be racing, James French is a plenty quick driver. To not be able to set a lap over the course of that 10-minute stretch, obviously is disappointing. And it'll leave him on the outside looking in. There is a B room for those who want the track time and the practice and the exposure to iRacing. But in the meantime... Like we've mentioned, we have our field of 40 qualifying is complete.
Now he'll set us up in the new one when
and now,
one thing
Hold on, guys. Sorry,
setting up.
who was that, Scott? I would have cut that off. We still had voice chat running, and I needed to get rid of that.
Right. That was Jerome Barreau. Yes, apologies for the pronunciation.
Amateur
So
hour.
setting up now for the dual sprint races that are going to make up our first round of the USACkarting.com Invitational eSeries from Okayama. We're going to take a pause here at DriversEye Live while we set up the grid of 40. And we expect to be green at 7:50. We'll be back with you in just a couple of minutes' time. We're going to mute ourselves here and get iRacing set back up for the grid. We've had to sort of change things around a little bit just to make sure that iRacing behaves exactly the way we want it to, and we can get our dual 30-minute sprints in for tonight. So we'll be back with you in just a couple of moments' time from the Okayama International Circuit. Well, hello again, everybody. Back on DriverSeye Live from the USACkarting.com Invitational eSeries, iRacing, and the Okayama International Circuit. Happy to have everybody's company. Appreciate your patience there as we got the grid lined up, our fastest 40, as it were, set up for the first of two 30-minute sprint races around Japan's Okayama circuit. Cars are gridding up on the short chute, sort of behind the paddock complex, and they'll be getting underway here in roughly a minute and a half for a short pace lap, and then 30 minutes of hard racing to the check at the conclusion. With me still, Joseph Mudrock and Scott Michaels. Scott, you've got plenty of time in the GT3 cars here in iRacing, driving the Z4 for Vulcan Horse Motorsport, of course. 30 minutes, Okayama. It's not a particularly high wear circuit, a lot of slow corners, so you're not loading the car up quite a bit. Is there still an approach to be taken towards conserving tires and the resources that the car has through 30 minutes of race?
30 minutes, as you say, is for a car designed specifically for endurance racing is not a long time. There's still the option these drivers are going to have to try and conserve their tire life. They might find balance changes through the race, but it's really, in such a short race, it's going to be more a case of dealing with what happens than actively trying to save your tyres, I think, at least. We may find, as we have a little bit of contact towards the back of the field on the pace lap. But yeah, we might find some drivers taking it easy towards the start. It'll be interesting to see if that happens or not.
On the front row, Carlos Villa and Nick Rowland. The 46 is Carlos. He'll be on driver's right. Nick Rowland will be to his left. They come around the last corner and onto the front straightaway. And in just a few moments' time, the USACkarting.com Invitational eSeries from Okayama is green. 40 cars down the front straightaway. Carlos Villa in the Mercedes jumps right out into the lead. And Nick Rowland sits behind him in the... I'm sorry, it's Justin Richesen now into second in the number 67. Oh, man, that 07 looks so like a 67. So it's Mercedes, Audi, Mercedes at... no, it's Mercedes, Mercedes, Audi, isn't it, at the front?
The Mercedes, well, yes. When they took the line,
Absolutely,
it was
yep.
Mercedes, Audi's Mercedes, but that's changed, yeah.
Absolutely, yep. The timing hasn't quite refreshed there. It's Justin Richesen in second, who's got the jump on Nick Rowland. Alex Gomez in fourth, behind Nick Rowland. And as they come down the back straightaway, lots of weaving back and forth. Alex Gomez in the 64 red Mercedes you see there pops out to driver's left around the outside in the braking zone around Nick Rowland and into the hairpin for the first time. We follow along with the satellite trio at the front. Gomez not able to make the move stick down into the hairpin at the end of the back straightaway. And Carlos Villa is right up on the back. I'm sorry, the 07 is right up on the back of Carlos Villa. Justin Richesen in the braking zone, moving around left and right as they work their way through another sequence of hairpins. This is to finish up the lap on the gas and up into third gear through the double right-hander just at the pit entrance to complete lap number 1 of the USACkarting.com Invitational eSeries. Your leader for the first lap from pole position is Carlos Villa.
Got a bit of a pile-up at the back of the field, unfortunately. Chris McCoy, who snuck his way in right at the end of qualifying, has got mixed up a bit. Looks like with Gene Thayer and a few other drivers who got another spin. This is in the left-right hairpin section towards the end of the lap. Josh, is that what we're calling it? Josh Hammond as well is currently getting himself out of the grass. He'll be one of the last drivers to complete the first lap in his Ferrari.
Taking a look at Jason Morris here back in P15 as we head back up to the leading group now. The number 46, the 07, and the 67. It's a Mercedes 1-2 at the moment, but more importantly, it's a satellite 1-2-3. And as we said at the end of qualifying, this really no surprise. So many of the satellite drivers at the SimCraft 24 Hours of Orlando were brought over from sort of the sim racing realm, given their chance through the satellite racing organization. Their karts put together by Satellite and Praga, and they're feeling obviously right at home in these GT3 cars.
So it was interesting to see in qualifying that Carlos Villa and Nick Rowland had a bit of a gap on the rest of the field, about 0.4 of a second, if I remember. We're not seeing, well, firstly, of course, Nick Rowland's lost second place, but we're not seeing Carlos Villa escape as much as we maybe would have thought after 2 laps. We've got Justin Richardson right behind him as Carlos Villa overshoots turn 1 slightly and loses even more of his lead.
Yeah, new fast lap from Richardson, going to 129.
Yeah, so he's showing a lot of pace that presumably he started 3rd, so it wasn't a terrible start. But see if these two can escape as Nick Rowland's under even more pressure now from Alex Gomez.
Absolutely right there with Nick as they make their way into the hairpin that sends them onto the long back straightaway. And that Mercedes does seem to have the legs down the back straightaway. He's going to look left in the braking zone. It's actually more Nick Rowland's fading right to defend as they jump on the brakes. That Audi just, I don't think it quite has the pace to stick with the 2 Mercedes up front. Looking out the back now of Carlos Villa's number 46 Mercedes AMG GT3, the satellite cars right in behind. And these lead 2, these 2 Mercedes have just started to gap a little bit as Carlos slides wide again, exiting the first of the 2 hairpins.
Got a crash further back coming out of turn 3. It's Timothy Sigwert, number 30. I think he's lost the front of his Ferrari there.
Oh, absolutely. There's major damage to the front of his Ferrari and as well to the car ahead of him. I believe that's the number 31 of Perry Herndon. There's a lot of damage
because he's been run into the back of by, I think that's the Ferrari we saw in trouble on lap 1.
And there's contact again.
It's a shame for Timothy because he'd come from 39th on the grid to 23rd at the start of this lap. Another car off is Jason Morris, the number 512. Sorry, no, it's not Jason Morris.
512 is the Bilstein Mercedes up at the front of that group.
Sorry, it's Bob McBride, number 44. Had a spin in the 90-degree left before the short shoot. He's back underway though.
Yeah,
in his Audi.
Worse for wear.
So we had a surprisingly clean first lap while everyone was bunched together, but it seems like as the field started to spread slightly and people have found their legs, they've also found the edge of the track.
Yeah, it's all got a bit wild here.
Yeah, it's spreading out quite nicely at the back of the field.
Still following around Bob McBride. And now, just like that, Mr. Director moves back to the lead Mercedes of Carlos Villa. This lead, let's call it a quartet, I think. You could drop it all the way back to Alex Gomez. Is gapping Andrew Pinkerton in 5th ever so slightly. That number 77 Mercedes has not yet broken the 1:29 barrier like the lead 4 have. But nevertheless, Pinkerton, you just see him there coming off the last corner in the back of the screen in the white and black Mercedes with a little bit of gold trim, leading Brendan Baker in 6th. Jason Quinn is 7th. Ryan Thomas in 8th. Andre Azzolini in 9th. And then I believe it'll be Austin Osborne in 10th. Indeed, he comes across. Oh, no, it's Davey Hamilton in 10th.
Well, let's keep an eye out for Pinky, who's just at the fastest lap of the race.
And just like that, I'm saying he was stuck in the 130s. You're absolutely right. He's just dropped a 1:29.472, just 0.08 quicker than Carlos Villa's best lap, a 1:29.480 that last time, and he's very quickly making that lead quartet a quintet.
Shout out to Alex Varillas, our highest climber so far. He's come from 38th on the grid up to 21st. So in the space of just 4 laps, he's about to take 20th as we've got car in front of him. Austin Olds has taken a trip through the gravel. Austin Olds himself started 36th and is up to 20th. 21st now. Alex Varillas, 18 places in 4 laps. Very impressive.
Yeah, there's a lot of chaos there in laps 3 and 4. We were trying to follow some of it around, and we did see some of it. A lot of cars were covering their way back to the pit lane, a number of them being towed back into the pit lane, but it's allowed a lot of the cars that started further back and kept their nose clean for those first few laps with a chance to break their way up into the top half of the field as it is now. Following Andrew Pinkerton, we're on board there for just a moment. He heads down the front straightaway, and once again just being gapped ever so slightly.
Austin Osborne from 10th place has had a spin coming onto the short chute. So he has now dropped behind. Ben Varner had also had an issue, and he seems to have damage and is cruising back to the pits. They're down to the back end of the top 20 now, those guys.
Nick Rowland has pulled himself up towards Justin Richardson, and I think you could probably make the case that Justin's fallen back from Carlos Villa, if anything. and the two of them now nose to tail as they come off the right-hander that brings them onto the uphill back straightaway. So important to get a good run off that right-hander and accelerate up through the gears cleanly. Of course, these cars do have traction control and ABS, but you're still sort of fighting for traction as you come off the corner there. It is a little flat until you start to gain the camber and head your way up the hill. Oh, and second place is off. Justin Richardson, and he's spinning. He's spun off to driver's right as he came around the double left-hander that leads them behind the paddock. And there he is. Oh, he's correcting now. He's backed up onto the circuit. It looked like he might have been able to save that, but as the camera kept going following Nick Rowland through the incident, obviously Justin wasn't able to save the car. Just pushed a little too hard, it looked like, on his way through the first of the left-handers onto the gravel, and there was no saving the car once it started to get sideways from there.
Got a little bit of traffic. Blake McCord is dealing with Dexter Quinn right now. Blake being 12th place. I don't know what's happened to Dexter at the start, but he's obviously had a difficult run, probably been in the pits. He does seem to be up to speed though, so hopefully he won't be holding Blake McCord up too much. Alex Varillas update. He's up to 18th place now, so making his way through the field nicely.
Position through attrition, I guess, is the catchphrase to go along with that.
Yeah, we are nearly a third of the way into this race, projecting 21 laps, working on our 7th right now.
Yeah,
another driver who's been in trouble is Wes Dushak. I noticed was in the pits for a little while there, presumably getting a tow and a fast repair. He's 2 laps down, but has got his Mercedes back out on the track.
We're going to be no traffic just yet. There are a couple of cars just up ahead of this group of leaders. The number 12, the number 39 are working their way through the final 2 corners now. And if you're familiar with the Okayama International Circuit, that's just about 10 seconds ahead of where our lead trio now sits, having disposed of Justin Richardson on the previous lap.
Now, obviously, because of the issues for our previous second place sitter, Carlos Villa now has got a little bit of an escape from Nick Rowland. So there's not a huge amount of slipstream in these cars, but if you can get that second and a half gap, then that gets you out of that range. So it'll be interesting to see if Carlos can stretch this away, or if Nick Rowland can get himself back in kind of range he needs to be in to attack towards the end of the race.
Scott, I want to take us back to the moment from Justin Richardson around halfway through lap 4. These cars obviously, like I mentioned, have traction control and ABS, so there's some electronic aids to lean on there, but there's no stability control as such in any of these cars, unless I'm mistaken. So even though when you're on the throttle or perhaps on the brakes, you have some backup there to sort of save you from plowing your way off the track, there really isn't much in the way of, once the car starts to slide, anything to lean on there.
No, and actually these cars have quite an aggressive ABS system, which can cause real issues when you get into trouble. Obviously they're great particularly for more gentleman drivers, which is what GT3 cars are designed for, but if you get into a spin or you get off the track, typically an experienced racing driver will slam on the brakes, and that just stops the car from spinning or ploughing into the barrier. If you've got an ABS system, then you're kind of the control is taken out of your hands at that point. You're a bit of a bobsled heading towards whatever you're heading towards, which is often something that makes a spin worse. To be honest, it can really exacerbate the problem. We saw that with Richardson earlier, where he had the spin and ended up on the other side of the track, rather than being able to just lock the brakes, get the car stopped, and then return to the circuit as quickly as possible. Got another crash in turn 2, 2 of them in fact. One of them is Chris McCoy, who we've seen in trouble before. He's facing the barrier. And then also Jason Quinn, who has just spun out of 6th place under yellow flags, interestingly. He's made a quick recovery and hasn't hit anything. Is now right in front of, trying to find who that is. So he's in amongst a bunch of lap cars.
Not to interrupt you, Scott, but we had a spin as well at the hairpin leading on to the back straightaway. It was Kyle Levreau to driver's right in the red and white Ferrari. Had managed to spin inside the apex of the hairpin, Just as the leaders came through, we were on board with Nick Rowland in the Audi R8 LMS as it happened. We move on board now with Jason Quinn in the Mercedes-AMG P6 at the moment, just in behind Brendan Baker.
Alex Gomez is putting Nick Rowland under increasing pressure here, so...
we've got a pass on for P5 Scott. Jason Quinn up the inside of Brendan Baker, and Baker pleads no contest on the brakes into the hairpin at the end of the short back straightaway with a Ferrari off from behind. Yep, absolutely. And I'll try and get you a number there. He's recovered anyway, whoever it was. Oh, it was Kyle Lavreau again, the number 12. In any case, out the back of Jason Quinn, having just passed that's the 07, the recovering Justin Richezin, isn't it? Down the front straightaway again. Jason Quinn, worth noting, is an A license. He's got plenty of time.
Sorry to interrupt, Brendan, but we've got the leader stuck behind a lapped car. It's Justin Atchison. He now goes down the inside at turn 3, but that's lost him all of the 7/10 lead he had at the start of the lap, and Nick Rowland is now right behind him under the rear wing as they go into the straight.
Crucially, that was happening just as you need that launch onto the back straightaway. It looks like there's enough legs of the Mercedes of Carlos Villa up in the lead to be able to get him enough of a gap that he doesn't really need to defend so aggressively into the braking zone at the end of the back straightaway. But that was exactly where you don't want to be catching traffic if you're sort of engulfed in a battle.
We've now got Bob McBride, Perry Herndon and TJ Scott all directly in front of the leaders as they make contact. That's Perry Herndon getting rear-ended by Bob McBride, but the leaders are now right behind, so this is going to be
we're riding on board with Carlos Villa as we speak. He goes past the Mercedes, the number 31 Mercedes, and settles in to chase down the black and red Audi just in front of him, and he's going to spin to driver's right as the leaders come up behind him onto the front straightaway. Made that a little easier for Carlos Villa, but no less exciting, that's for sure. Particularly because you don't know exactly where that car is going to go. Fortunately, he sort of locked the brakes down and spun to the inside, but there's every chance that car could have either overcorrected and popped right back out onto the apex in front of the leader, or done something even more unpredictable that would have compromised exactly where Carlos Villa had to make his decision to weave his way through that lap traffic.
Yeah, now Carlos Villa
now in P3.
It looks like the leader's bogged down again behind lap traffic.
Yep, and he's flashing his lights now at the P40 car of TJ Scott. The Mercedes down the back straightaway is holding the racing line. Villa goes left and then goes right onto the brakes into the hairpin. Let's hope that, and he does see Nick Rowland there in the number 67. I wasn't sure that TJ Scott had seen the other two cars coming up behind him, but he does what is right and stays out of the way and allows the lead trio the chance to pick their way through and resume racing. We're just past halfway into race 1 of the USACkarting.com Invitational eSeries Okayama circuit. This is DriversEye Live. Brendan Kazmarek, Joseph Mudrak, and Scott Michaels with you. We followed the lead battle, an absolutely enthralling trio between it's Carlos Villa, Nick Rowland, and Alex Gomez, who make up the top 3. Andrew Pinkerton just about 5 seconds off the leader at the moment, with Brendan Baker rounding out the top 5.
I'm told, by the way, that it's pronounced Gomes. It's Alex Gomes, so we'll make that correction going forward.
There you go. Yep, Gomes. I gotcha.
Another mention for a driver who's made a really great move up the field from their starting position. Nikita Ponaris has come from 34th, and they've just taken 13th at the hairpin, away from... Excuse me while I find that car. It's Hugh North, who... sorry, it's the other way around, in fact. Nikita has just lost 14th to Hugh North, but still a brilliant drive through the field in the first 11 laps here to come up 20 places.
Quite a lot of carnage here in the
leaders, in fact, are going in between two cars who are both off the track. They've managed to safely navigate those cars with roughly the same gap they had before. Nick Rowland a few tenths behind Villa, and then a little bit of a gap back to Alex Gomes in the Mercedes. But yeah, that was a close moment there with two cars going across the grass that they were trying to lap.
Now, I'll pose this to either one of you, Scott or Joseph. Based on what you're seeing here from Nick Rowland in the number 67 Audi R8 LMS, does it look to you like he's sitting and just sort of biding his time behind Carlos Villa, or is he really giving it everything he has just to try and hang off the back of the Mercedes?
I would say he's got to be. The thing is, he can't afford to be too lackadaisical about it, right? Because he's got Gomes right behind him. The three of them have a little bit of a gap on Pinky, but he doesn't really have that much breathing room to, just lay back. He can't do like a Marc Marquez, right? And just wait until the last lap to snipe him.
I would also say that you never know how the traffic's going to go, and when in doubt, be in the lead is the attitude you really want to take. So if you manage to get in the lead and you still get held up by traffic, then it is what it is. But if you intentionally sit in second and end up with cars in between you and the leader at some point, and that's enough of a gap that you can't get back before the end of the race, then that's a real disaster. So yeah, if it was me, I would certainly be. And again, Nick,
he's making a move, looking for it.
Exactly.
Takes
a little look down the inside, and he's done that a few times now. So my impression is that he's at least trying to harry Carlos Villa into a mistake, if not actively trying to make a pass.
Yeah,
he's only got a handful of laps left here. Maybe 7 or 8 more times he can give that a shot before we get to the checkered flag at 30 minutes. I'll say this as well, that he is the only Audi up in the top 4 at the moment, and even earlier on, before we saw carnage and attrition start to take its toll, he was really the lone 4-ringed vehicle up there. The Mercedes really kind of seemed to have the edge in terms of raw pace.
Anthony Balthas in the BMW, apologies for that pronunciation, I'm sure it's terrible, had a spin at the last corner there and got stuck up against the barrier, so that's dropped him about 5 or 6 positions down to 22nd place in the number 61 green BMW. Apologies, the number 05 green BMW.
Yeah, we're learning our way through this as well as PMG Promotions and USAC Karting. Obviously, this is race 1, and this is our first sim broadcast for quite some time, so appreciate you sticking with us here. We've got 10 more minutes of racing to go here in race 1, and then another 30 minutes to come after that as we jump on board with Nick Rowland's Audi R8 LMS.
He doesn't
Satellite
really have
Racing
the run,
1
so
and 2.
If he's going to make a move, it's going to be way too far back.
He's also, interestingly, now got a gap on Alex Gomes, which can affect how he attacks Carlos Villa for the lead. He can afford to make a move that might not come off so badly because he's not in so much danger of losing that second place.
Right, he can afford to lose momentum if he tries to throw it down the inside and just loses a second in the process.
Absolutely.
That gap is now 1.8 seconds between second and third.
And that's probably, as we see Trevor Adrusko take a bit of a slide across the grass to Mercedes. Well held though. He's in 24th place, first car a lap down. As I was about to say, sorry, I've been totally distracted by that Mercedes taking a lurid slide.
Yeah.
I've reminded myself. It's kind of going back to what I was saying about the traffic. I imagine that's how Alex Gomes lost some time, was a couple of cars got in that gap between himself and Nick Rowland, and that's just stretched it out to the point where he's going to have a really hard time in the next 7 minutes or so to get that back.
Yeah, so Vila's just done his own fast lap of the session at a 129.1. He and Rowland appear to be the only ones in the 29.1s.
So that doesn't necessarily mean that the tyres aren't going off, it's just the GT3 cars also get faster as the fuel burns off. So that's why we're seeing quick times now.
Ooh, contact just ahead of the leaders there between the BMW Z4, the number 05, and is that the 21? It is, of Gene Thayer. They sort of take themselves out of the picture for the moment, off to driver's right, and allow the 2 leaders through, however unintentional all that was. Alex Gomes in third, back up with the leaders, and all that, it didn't really seem to slow the leaders down any.
You got the 61 in front of them?
Yep, I don't think it allowed anybody else into the picture. It's going to hold Rowland up a little bit, though. He's got to pinch himself sort of back towards the apex of the penultimate corner, and that just allows Carlos Villa a little bit.
Gomes is
pitting. It's a stop for Gomes. Interesting. So I wonder what this is.
Yeah, I can't imagine. It's obviously not scheduled. There's no reason he would be making a pit stop in this race. Certainly not mandatory.
No.
So possibly a penalty of some description. I didn't see him have any contact on that lap, so it's unlikely to be a meatball flag from
There's
damage.
a trio of Mercedes into the pits behind him.
Yeah, I saw the two
I'm
pinkies in there
curious
also.
on the Mercedes fuel mileage here. Are the Mercedes burning more fuel than they were set up with, or set up to make it through to the end of the race with?
It's unlikely
Running at a higher
because
map.
the baseline setup, which is what I think all these guys were limited to, starts with a full tank, and a full tank can go about an hour.
It's not the baseline setup, Scott.
Oh, is it not?
No, these are modified setups. They're balanced from another league. They are well balanced between each other around Okayama, but they are not the baseline setup.
In which case, we should keep an eye on pit lane to see if any more Mercedes end up coming down.
In particular, we need to keep an eye on Carlos Vila because he is the other Mercedes out in front. Behind him, it's just Nick Rowland and Brendan Baker in the Audis. And Carlos Vila has to pit.
All right.
I think the Mercedes are all short on fuel.
Is everybody short on fuel?
You know, it's tough to tell, Joseph, at the moment, but for sure the Mercedes are. The Bilstein Mercedes, I think it's the number 512, is in the pits up in front of the leader.
It's all Mercedes in the pits.
It is. Yeah, I think there's a minor...
I take that back. Patterson in the 63 is the first Ferrari to have pitted.
Right. Okay. Very few Ferraris in the field, though, relatively speaking. I think there's only 4 of them, I believe.
Yes.
4 of them.
So Vila's out.
Yep, Vila's out of the pits, but it's left 3 Audis at the front of the field. Has it not? Roland, Baker, and I believe it'll be Azzolini in third. Yes, it is.
I believe Via is still going to be in 4th place, though, after his pit stop.
I think you're right. Yeah, it was just a splash and go. Just enough fuel to get home for the remaining 5 minutes.
Another
bit of a shame that, actually. Because it's kind of spoiled what we had at the head of the field. Go ahead, Scott.
Apologies, Brendan.
No worries.
Another thing to bear in mind here is that the pit lane entry isn't the simplest in the world. You have to make the entry before the penultimate corner, as we're seeing a whole crowd of other Mercedes coming in. None of our front runners that I can see right now on pit entry. But yeah, you have to make the pit entry before the penultimate corner here. If you do it after the penultimate corner, you'll get a penalty. So hopefully all the drivers are aware of that.
Yeah, and you see all the Mercedes stuck there in the pit lane as we pick up Carlos Vila around the back of the circuit now. He's harrying... Oh, and the Audi. Andrea Azzolini is in the pits.
Okay.
Is that not the... it is the 20...
Yeah. That's 3rd place.
So it looks like all the cars are going to have to stop. But what's interesting... hopefully that's the case, yeah. Otherwise, we've got some questions for the legal organizers.
Really quick, Scott, I want to make this point. Vila registered 4 seconds and change fewer in the pits than Gomes did. So Gomes actually lost a bit there in that exchange. And so we're still waiting for Nick Rowland to do his stop, but that's just another variable on top of the pit entry. Just how long you actually spent in your pit lane makes a big difference.
If indeed Rowland is going to need a stop. We're, 4 laps to go. It'll be less than that, I believe.
Yeah, we're
do you know that
just
coming up to the end of the 27th minute. Yeah, okay. So Rowland will probably have 3 this lap, and then 2 more would be my guess.
Yes, and so that would be.
He's going around again.
Yeah.
So I find it interesting that pretty much the entire field who have pitted have obviously left it right towards the end of the race. So I feel like they all felt like maybe they had a chance of making it. So in that case, perhaps that's exactly what these guys who haven't had to pit yet have managed to do. They've managed to stretch their fuel mileage so they can make it. If everyone was planning on pitting as an absolute, then I would have expected some of the field to have pitted early to try and get themselves out of traffic. Even though you'll always be running slower with more fuel on board, it's better than having to suffer the field spread.
I'll tell you what, guys, it's going to be really close here with Nick Rowland. I'm not sure what his fuel situation is, but it's going to be very, very borderline for having to do 3 more laps versus 2 more laps. If he backs off about 2 seconds, and at this point, why wouldn't you?
So
he should be able to cut that extra lap off the end.
So to pierce the veil a little bit, ATVO has its own sort of lap projection going on, and it's kind of been oscillating between 20 and 21. If he were to pit, I think he would slip into 20, and if he doesn't slip into 21, it's a really kind of on the line sort of situation right now.
Yeah, all he really needs to do is back off about 2 to 3 seconds total and ensure that he's not going to cross the line on his last lap before the 30-minute mark from the green flag. He's, like I said, a very, very borderline, 26.59.
Brendan Baker in second place. Sorry, Brendan. Brendan Baker in second place has just clipped the grass on the way into the last left-hand hairpin on the circuit and taken a trip through the gravel. I believe he's now lost second place, Carlos Villa, because of that.
I think you're right, Scott.
Yeah.
So, back to the subject you were just on. Another, just to reveal a little quirk of iRacing that some people might not be aware of. iRacing actually decides when the checkered flag's going to come out when the driver in the lead is coming around to take the white flag. So while you might think, oh, if I back off right before I come across the line to hit 0 time remaining, that's actually too late. You need to do it a lap before that.
Right, and I had endeavored to make that point, but I didn't quite get that far. It's whether in iRacing or not, you don't want to leave it to chance, right? To where you're guessing whether or not the sim is going to behave a certain way. And when you have a lead of 20 plus seconds, as Nick Rowland does at the moment, 22.8 over the number 46 Carlos Villa, why wouldn't you back off? Why would you take the chance on fuel?
Having said that, he's still setting 29s, which says to me that he's not in any kind of mass fuel save.
He's not going for pits.
Around again.
So how many Audi have thus far, as I can tell?
Azzolini did. He's the only Audi I've seen.
So do we think this is going to be the last lap now?
No, I think there's 2 to go now.
2 to go.
He just crossed the line with a second to go.
I'm sorry, white flag now. Yep, there you go. So it is the final lap.
He's obviously very confident he can make it, having not decided to back off with 20 seconds in hand, either to save fuel or to go a lap shorter through the race. We've got a Mercedes there off the circuit.
Now here's a question: did Villa et al., all the Mercedes to go with him, did they put in enough fuel to do this quote-unquote extra lap, or were they planning on rolling backing off?
Speaking of Mercedes and fuel, I think Perry Herndon just ran out between turns 2 and 3.
Okay,
he's towed back to the pits. Yeah, that was the Mercedes that we were looking at.
Okay.
Through the double left-hander that brings you onto the quote-unquote back straight behind the paddock at Okayama International Circuit for the final time in race 1 of the USACkarting.com Invitational eSeries. Nick Rowland hasn't led the whole way by any stretch of the imagination, but thanks to a little fuel frugality from the Audi R8 LMS, he's put himself in a position to be able to make it through to the checkered flag without having to stop. Across through the last corner, the right-hander accelerates past the number 21, and Nick Rowland takes the first checkered flag of the 2020 USACkarting.com Invitational eSeries from Okayama. 31 minutes and 28 seconds of racing completed, 21 laps done, and Nick Rowland has just earned Satellite Racing a cool $100 towards their entry in the 2021 SimCraft 24 Hours of Orlando. So well done, Nick.
Carlos Villa is going to come through in second. Another Audi to benefit from not having to pit is Brendan Baker. He certainly wasn't one of our top 5 runners earlier on in the race, but he's managed to get himself onto the podium ahead of Alex Gomes and Matt Strand, who is he another Audi?
He is another. He's a Z4, and he's run out of fuel. I think he's a Z4 out of fuel, coasting up the hill.
Yeah, I think that's right, because
through the left and right at the end of the lap.
Because it's Pinkerton now in 5th.
Yep, absolutely. Azzolini in P6.
Yeah.
Yep, he'll pass Strand. Hoffman in 7th.
Everyone on this lap will pass Strand. He's exited the car.
Yep, absolutely, and that'll drop Strand back to, I believe, P11. Max Calder will be the last one to pick up the position, which is a little ironic because I'm pretty sure Max Calder ran with Satellite Racing at the 24 Hours of Orlando. Little cruel luck for the team principal there, Matt Strand. Justin Rotesen, by the way, ended up P13 after all was said and done. It wasn't the cleanest race for Justin. It started out awfully promising.
Now, you say it's bad luck for Matt Strand, but unlike in the real world, we have 100% accurate fuel measurement on board these iRacing
there's
cars.
no fuel pickup issues.
So there's no real excuse for running out of fuel on the last lap. Maybe if Matt was in danger of being lapped, if he did come in the pits, it could be excusable, but that wasn't the case. He was only about 40 seconds behind the leader at that time.
What is slightly cruel, although difficult to place blame anywhere but on Matt, he's ended up P11. And
no, he doesn't get the benefit of the reverse top 10.
Exactly. So we haven't discussed this yet, but race 2, which is going to come up here in not too terribly long, is an invert of the top 10 from race 1. So what we're going to get for race 2 is Nikita Panaris on the pole. Max Calder will sit to his left as they come up to take the green flag. Meanwhile, Nick Rowland and Carlos Villa will end up 9th and 10th respectively. So they have a little more work to do this time than they did in race 1. But being that we were talking about Matt Strand's situation, unfortunately he just misses out on being able to start on pole for race 2.
Wow.
Now all of this was going on in race control. The decision's been made to shorten race 2 by 5 minutes.
To avoid disadvantaging the Mercedes, presumably.
Exactly. So it's reduced to 25 minutes. The setups that were provided to the organizers just didn't have enough fuel in them to make it through the 30 minutes. And being a fixed setup league, obviously you can't change the amount of fuel in the car.
Now, am I right in
and
thinking...
unfortunately, it really did handicap the Mercedes. Go ahead, Joseph.
Am I right in thinking Rowland and Vila are both satellite entries?
They are.
Okay, so that didn't affect that little aspect of the event, which is
No.
fortuitous.
I'm not sure as well. Sorry, Gomes may also be a satellite entry.
Okay, he's
Number
got the right number
64,
for it.
the classic. Yeah, exactly.
Now, this is going to be very interesting because
Oh, it's going to be fascinating.
Yeah.
I mean, the racing in race 1 was awesome, especially up at the top of the field, up until we saw the error eventually by Justin Richezin that sort of separated everything out, and then the obvious fuel issues for the Mercedes. I think if we get sort of an unrestricted run through 25 minutes of racing, we could see something really special here in race 2, particularly with excuse me. Technical difficulties with Nick Rowland and Carlos Villa having to pick their way through the remainder of the top 10. Interesting to note too that top 10 were the only cars that finished on the lead lap. Matt Strand was the first car 1 lap down, owing to him not being able to complete his final lap. Jason Quinn in 12th, just beat out Justin Richezin there back in 13th. Blake McCord 14th, Hugh North in 15th, and Louis Satterley finished P15 in the number 61.
Yeah, so an interesting note made, at least in the YouTube stream, I don't know about elsewhere. The Audis, it seems, were the only ones who were able to complete the full distance.
Also, another aspect that I've noticed is our 10th place finisher, so therefore our pole sitter for race 2, started 34th on the grid. So they were also our highest climber. And therefore will have 2 different races, one where they start 34th and one where they start 1st.
Yeah, that's a little bit of a different dynamic for Nikita.
So I have a very comprehensive list of satellite drivers.
Oh
being
boy.
that this is sort of their territory, the sim racing.
This is going to take a
all this.
second stream, Brendan.
It could. It's Nick Rowland, Carlos Villa, Justin Richezin, Matt Strand, Max Calder, Louis Satterley, and Gene Thayer.
Okay.
So the 7 total.
7 out of 40. That's a pretty good...
Correct. So, we've got some business to take care of here. we've got to get set up for race 2, which is going to take obviously another event in iRacing. So we are going to take a break here. Driver's Eye Live, Brendan Kasmarek, Joseph Mudrock, and Scott Michaels with you for the USAC.com or USACkarting.com Invitational eSeries from Okayama. All brought to you thanks to iRacing and presented by the SimCraft 24 Hours of Orlando. We'll be back with you in a few minutes' time here as we get everything cleaned up and the grid set for another 25 minutes and 40 cars to wrap things up for the night from Okayama. So we'll be back with you in just a couple of moments' time. Well, hello again, everybody. DriversEye live from the first week of the USACkarting.com Invitational eSeries. You might have noticed we didn't go back racing at 8:45 or at 8:50 for that matter. We've come up to 9 o'clock now, and I think we've run into some technical issues on the iRacing end of things. 16,000 people are trying to use the iRacing service at the moment, including the 40 or so of us. And it looks like it might just be a little bit too much for the service to handle, which is fair. Unfortunately, it means we're not going to be able to hold race 2 tonight at Okayama. TJ has worked out most of the details so far, and it sounds like the plan is going to be to cancel race 2 for tonight, to drop this as round 1 and move the official round 1 of the series to Lime Rock next Wednesday night. So we'll be doing the same thing this time next weekend, 2 30-minute races from Lime Rock on cars that have plenty of fuel to go the distance, around a bull ring for 2 times 30 minutes, which will be a lot of fun for us and a lot of fun for those of you who decided to join us tonight. And I hope you'll join again next week for race 1. We'll also be, for round 1. We'll also be adding an event onto the end of the series. That's up to TJ to decide and PMZ Promotions to decide. All things considered, though, I don't know about you guys. Race 1, round 1 was a blast.
Yeah, definitely. I was very impressed with the first lap. A lot of the replacement series we've seen pop up over the last month or so have a feature of it has been pretty crazy first laps, and I was really impressed to see everyone understand that when you've got 40 cars around you, you've got to bring it back a notch. Especially karters, they're not known for that sort of thing. So yeah, that was great to see. And then we had a really good dice for the top 5 or so, as well as for some battles further back in the pack. Obviously, end of the race was a little bit unique, shall we say? But yeah, overall, very, very good experience.
Yeah, I thought it was a lot of fun. Everyone kept it mostly clean. When people came up to get lapped, I thought we were gonna lose all of our leaders at the same time, and that didn't happen. So it was a pleasant surprise to keep everybody mostly clean on what. It's got some length to it, but it still feels like a little bit of a bull ring. But all in all, I thought it was a fun race to be a part of, and it was nice to kind of shake the rust off from the production side.
Yeah, for sure. And the racing, I mean, to pivot from, what we had at the SimCraft 24 Hours of Orlando, which is by design, bigger gaps and sort of strategy based into, to move back to a sprint race, 30 minutes on track, to have, the top 4 or 5 cars right together, for the duration of the 30 minutes up until the Mercedes had to make their pit stops. It was just fantastic to watch. I mean, Nick and Carlos were awesome right up through Carlos having to bring the Mercedes into the pits. It was from my perspective, it was a great race. It's a shame we didn't get the encore for race 2, but nevertheless, Nick Rowland, your first winner in the USACkarting.com Invitational eSeries, has earned himself a $100 credit to next year's entry at the SimCraft 24 Hours of Orlando. We'll be doing this for 5 more weeks now, is the plan, and hope to see everybody on the following Wednesday nights, same time, around 7:15. We'll go live for qualifying, and then 2 30-minute races to round everything out. So, with all that being said, I think technically we've done pretty well for ourselves. Commentary was a lot of fun from our end. Hope it was enjoyable by everybody watching. And with that, for myself, Brendan Kazmarek, Joseph Mudrock, and Scott Michaels joining me on the microphones for the USACkarting.com Invitational eSeries, presented by the SimCraft 24 Hours of Orlando. Thanks, everybody, for your company. And same time next week, 7:15, we'll be back with you from Lime Rock and iRacing, and we'll get to do this all again. So everybody enjoy the rest of your night, and we'll see you this time next week.